Ugh. What happened? Last thing I remember, it was like just starting to be springtime, and I'd just taken the bike apart and moved it to the basement. What day is it? August? That can't be right. I must have just went out for a ride and never come back. Ugh. So, what's been going on with the Matchless? Okay, so here's the deal. After I took the bike apart, I moved it down to the basement where I could work on the frame. And the intention was to completely disassemble everything so it could be sandblasted and repainted. The idea originally was that the bike would be put into some kind of a custom trim, that it wouldn't really resemble a stock bike anymore. And I feel okay with this because when it came home, if you remember from part 1, check the link if you don't, but if you remember from part 1, it was barn fresh. It was a wreck. The bike had seen better days. It still has seen better days. But because it wasn't really in a condition where it had been lovingly looked after, I felt like that was kind of licensed to put my own stamp on it. And it still kind of is. I still feel that way. However, I have encountered some difficulty with that disassembly process. The key thing there is that the swing arm pivot really doesn't want to come out. Now, I had originally had a go at taking that apart on the basis that it seemed really, really stiff. I had a whole video called "This Arm Doesn't Swing" because it was so stiff. But as I worked with the frame and applied more lubricant and sort of worked things through, that swing arm freed up. And that kind of made me think once about it. Now, as I worked with the frame, I got tired of my hands continuously coming away greasy and grubby and oily every time I had to touch it or move it. That gets old pretty quick too, as you can imagine. So I started washing it. Eventually I took it all the way outside and spent a whole afternoon sort of scrubbing it down and getting down there. And I noticed at that point that probably 60 to 75% of the paint on this frame is actually in really good condition. It remains a pretty nice, consistent black finish, especially in areas that were a little bit more protected. And that made me think twice about the idea of, do I need to sandblast this down? Especially remembering that this bike is from the 50s, and that's probably why the paint lasted so well, is because back then they were allowed to put lead and all kinds of other nasty stuff in the paint that we don't today, but that makes the paint adhere and last really, really well. Things were better in the past in a way, but they also made you sicker. And certainly stripping the frame at home is a non-starter if you're dealing with that. There are even shops that won't work on that because of the environmental rules. So that is another consideration going into this. But now that all that is kind of said and done, we're reaching the point where binding decisions have to be made. And that decision is basically, do we go back to something hopefully kind of close to stock, or do we go for something more individual? And I'm not 100% sure what I want, because on one hand, my original vision was kind of heavily inspired, to be honest, by something like a Moto Guzzi V7 racer, right? Kind of the red frame cafe, maybe low Clubman bars, shiny bodywork, chrome work, no expense spared, full zoot, full custom. And then on the flip side, having found some more materials and read a wonderful article in the club magazine, the Jam Pot magazine, and seen some period advertising for this particular model of bike, I really am developing a little bit more appreciation for what these bikes were and for what they sort of represented in the time period. And I think a little bit about what I want to do with the bike. Priority number one, it's got to be a runner and a rider. I don't personally have the time or space or disposable funds really to have museum pieces that are in perfect condition. So this bike has to go down the road. Like, that's a big part of what a bike is for. It's got to work. It's got to do the thing. I appreciate and respect the preservationists who want to keep everything perfect, but that is not my bag. So priority one, it's got to be a runner. Priority two, I want it to be a looker. I want it to look and feel right, like it's kind of a new old stock sort of bike. We're not going to get to full-on oily rag condition, but we hopefully will get to something that sort of, looks fresh, the kind of thing you don't have to make excuses for and say, oh, well, it's a 70-year-old bike. It's going to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. No. We want it to look straight. We want it to look right. The kind of thing that you're not ashamed to put into like a community show or something. Obviously, you're not going to take center stage at Pebble Beach, but, you roll it up with all the other guys who have, old bikes in your town and put it on display and say, yeah, I worked on that. I put it together and blah, 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 blah. And here's how I did it. And yeah, it's a runner. We want me to kick it over for you, yada, yada, yada. That's like priority number two. And that's kind of a second distantly to it being a runner. And I am very much like not that hung up anymore on the exact aesthetics. There's quite a lot of variety out there in how these looked. I have a little bit of a hunch how it looked when it was new, just based on the archaeology of all the pieces. The bike was probably a blue tank bike, which is a little weird for a Matchless. Every Matchless out there that you see is either black or red in this time period. But we're probably going to go that direction. It's not going to be perfectly factory original. We're probably going to replace parts as needed. We might, bring in replacement ignition system. We might convert to 12 volt. I'm very strongly thinking that this is going to end up being a 12 volt bike. So we want it to be a run and practical motorcycle, and we, don't want to have to make excuses for it. That's the main thing. Everything else we can live with. So now that the frame is clean, it's going to get a blast down of degreaser. There's spots on it where you can see the patina coming through, and where there's a little bit of the brazing starts to show where the tubes went together. And I'm thinking that we can probably just paint right over the old paint if we prime, and that'll be the way to go. Now the question is, do we go back towards stock or back toward custom? And I'm interested in finding out. I want to stick my finger in the air and feel which way the wind is blowing. So let me know what you think. And if you made it all the way through this little ramble blog of mine, thanks. Hope you have a good one. See you next time. Bye-bye.